A man cannot love a building the way a person should be loved. But Adrian Whitlock had been trying to do so for most of his life, and the building he loved was now exactly 17 days from being taken from him by his father. He stood in the lobby of the Halberstam Tower at 6:40 in the morning, hands in the pockets of a charcoal coat, eyes lifted to a ceiling that had been hidden under decades of soot and varnish, until a young woman on a scaffold above his head had begun, 3 months ago, to restore it. He could see her now, in the early light. A small figure in canvas overalls, hair pinned in a loose knot, brush moving with the patience of someone who had decided that cherubs deserved as much care as cathedrals. Adrian had not yet spoken to her. He had ordered coffees for her every Monday for 11 weeks. He did not know whether she drank them. He did know that today, finally, a sentence had to leave his mouth, because in less than 3 weeks, his father intended to host the unveiling gala that would either save the Halberstam or hand it to the wreckers. And after the gala, his father had told him in no uncertain terms, would come a quieter event, the trust vote, in which Cornelius Whitlock planned to ensure that his only son understood, in front of every investor and every partner and every camera in the city, what a Whitlock heir was supposed to want, and was not supposed to want, and what would happen if he confused the two. Adrian crossed the marble floor and looked up. "Miss Cole?" The brush did not pause. "Mr. Whitlock?" "You knew it was me." "I know everyone's footstep in this building by week 3. He almost smiled. "And mine?" "Slow on the marble, fast on the wood. You don't like the marble." "My grandmother slipped on this marble when she was 11. She worked here as a maid before she married into the family. She said the floor was a beautiful enemy." For the first time since he had said her name, Maren Cole looked down. It was the briefest glance, and her brush did not stop. But he caught the angle of her chin, and a flicker of recognition that told him this was the thing she had been waiting to learn about him. She had been told he was the cold heir. She had seen him take the elevator past her every morning, and she had assumed he had no relationship to the ceiling above her, except as an asset. She did not say any of that. She said, "Halberstam Rose." The cherubs are signed in the corner above the column. R for Rose. That was her, was it not? She painted the original. In the summer of 1959, my grandfather met her on the scaffolding. And bought the building. And married her. The building came with the marriage. Maren set down her brush. Adrian, who at 30 was supposed to know how to talk to women, particularly women who worked for him, found himself unable to do anything except watch her wipe her fingers on a clean rag. She climbed 2 rungs lower. She did not climb all the way down. "I would like," she said, "to do this part justice. There is an angel I've not been able to read for 7 months. I know it is a sister to the others, but I cannot tell what she is holding. The varnish is too thick. Today, I think I can get under it." "What time?" 4 hours from now." "May I be here when you do?" She looked at him properly, the first long look she had ever given him, and what she saw she did not say. "If you can keep your phone in your pocket, Mr. Whitlock, you may." He stayed. He pulled a folding chair from against the wall and set it at a respectful distance from the foot of the scaffold. He took out a thin grey notebook he had carried since he was 19, and he opened it to a blank page. And he did not, that morning, write a word in it. He sat in his coat. The construction crew came and went around him. They had been told that the man in the charcoal coat was not to be addressed unless he addressed them first. And they had been told this by a foreman who had liked Adrian's grandmother, and so they treated him with a politeness that had nothing in it of the building's owner. Maren, on the scaffold above his head, noticed 2 things in the long quiet between them. The first was that he did not once take his phone out of his pocket. The second was that he did not, when the crew passed beneath the scaffold with a small remark, look up at her to share it. He had decided, evidently, that she had asked for quiet, and he was giving it to her. She found the second thing more disarming than the first. 4 hours later, in the strange, clean silence that fell when the construction crew broke for an early lunch in the basement, Adrian stood at the foot of a scaffold and watched a woman he had decided, sometime in the previous 11 weeks, that he could not afford to want. Brush a chemical wash across a section of plaster the size of a dinner plate. The varnish lifted in a soft, pale curl. Beneath it, 2.5 feet above their heads, an angel revealed what she had been holding all this time. It was a small circle of stone. It looked, against the gold leaf, like the head of a key. Maren made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a breath. Adrian, against every directive he had ever issued to himself, reached up to her foot on the lowest rung and steadied her. "Don't fall," he said. "I never do." "I noticed." She came down the scaffold slowly, because she had been on it a long time and her ankles were stiff. When her boots met the marble, she was a head shorter than him and very tired, and lit from above by a light she had spent the morning revealing. He had not planned to feel anything in particular. He took his hand off the wood. He stepped back. He thanked her for letting him watch. He left the lobby before he could ruin a thing he did not yet understand. He had not, in any of the 11 weeks of bringing coffee, looked her in the face for longer than 3 seconds at a time. He had counted. He had thought of it as discipline. He understood, walking out of the Halberstam at 10:30 in the morning, that what he had been counting had also been waiting. In the cab uptown, he opened his phone for the first time in 4 hours and saw 11 missed calls from his father. Maren Cole rode the train home that night with paint under her fingernails and an envelope in her bag that contained the second half of a check she had not expected for 2 weeks more. The Halberstam restoration was not a job, exactly. It was a vocation she had argued her way into, undercutting 2 larger firms by promising she could match the original gilding by hand, and by promising it for less money than any sane preservationist would have quoted. The reason she had quoted that low was waiting for her at the door of her 1-bedroom in Inwood. Her older sister, Ruth, 6 months out of a marriage that had collapsed quietly, was holding a sleeping 6-year-old on her hip. Delia had wet her bed twice that week. Ruth had been hired and unhired from 2 part-time receptionist jobs in 3 months, because the agency that placed her did not consider single mothers reliable. Maren paid the rent. Maren bought the groceries. Maren had told her sister, on the night Ruth had arrived at her door with a duffel bag and a child in pajamas, that this was how their mother had wanted it, and this was what their mother had taught them, and there would be no further conversation on the matter. She made grilled cheese. She kissed Delia on the head. She let Ruth shower for 35 minutes, because Ruth had not been allowed to shower for 35 minutes uninterrupted in 4 years. Then she sat at the small kitchen table and opened her email. She read, twice, a message from Mr. Whitlock's assistant, which said that the Halberstam unveiling gala had been formally scheduled for the 22nd, that Mr. Whitlock had personally requested that the lead artisan attend as a named guest of the project, and that a wardrobe stipend would be made available, with a fitting at the Whitlock building on Park Avenue on Thursday at 4. Maren read it a 3rd time. She did not own a dress. She did not, on principle, accept clothing from people who employed her. She wrote a brief, polite refusal of the stipend, and a brief, polite acceptance of the invitation, and pressed send, and went into the bathroom, and did not cry, because she had learned, somewhere in her 20s, that the bathroom was a stage on which crying was permitted only when there was no one in the apartment who could hear it, and there was always someone in the apartment now. She stood in front of the mirror, with the door locked, and looked at herself, and asked the woman in the glass, gently, what was happening. The woman in the glass had no answer. She had been raised to believe that a woman who accepted a dress from her employer was a woman who had given up something she could not name afterward. Her mother had explained this once, slowly, the year she had gone back to cleaning houses to keep them in school, and Maren had understood, without anyone explaining it to her further, that the rule was not about dresses. It was about whose room you were standing in when you put the dress on, and whose mirror you used, and whose photograph would be taken in it. The woman in the glass had paint on her cheekbone in the shape of a small comma. She was 27 years old. She had not been kissed in 4 years. She had not, until that morning at 6:40, considered that this fact had become a habit of hers, an arrangement she had made with the world, rather than a misfortune that had befallen her. Ruth knocked. "Ma, did you eat?" I will. You said you would. I will. The next morning, Adrian Whitlock was waiting in the lobby of the Halberstam at 6:40 exactly, with 2 coffees, and he handed one of them to her without speaking, and she took it without speaking. And they stood for a long, quiet minute under a ceiling that was now 12 square feet less hidden than it had been the day before. Maren said, "Why this building?" Because she had been thinking about it on the train, and she could not work for someone whose reasons she did not understand. Adrian considered the question for what felt to her like an honest length of time. He told her about Halberstam Rose, who had come over from County Cork at the age of 7 and had begun work in the Halberstam kitchens at 11 and had been promoted to chambermaid at 15. She'd been seen, on a Tuesday in May of 1959, by the heir to the Whitlock fortune, who had asked her to dinner and been told that maids did not eat dinners. He had then asked her, very seriously, what maids did do, and she had told him that they painted ceilings on their own time, because painting ceilings was the only place where no one in the building could look down on them. She had painted the cherubs in his lobby with the permission of the foreman, because the previous artist had walked out, and she had told the foreman, at 16, that she could finish the work for less, and she had finished the work, and she had signed the angels with an R. He had married her in 1962. She had taught Adrian, between the ages of 3 and 9, every constellation in the lobby ceiling. She had passed when he was 14. The building had been hers. The building was now, in some measure of feeling that did not show up on title deeds, still hers. And his father, who had never loved Halberstam Rose with anything resembling decency, had decided to sell the building to a developer who would gut the lobby and put a coffee chain where the cherubs lived, unless Adrian, by his 30th birthday in 3 weeks, complied with a list of conditions that the trust would announce at the gala. Maren listened and did not interrupt, and when he had finished, she said only, "What are the conditions?" "He has not told me. He plans to announce them." "In public?" "In public." "Mr. Whitlock," she said, and her voice was so careful that he understood, finally, that he had told her too much. "I am very sorry. I do not believe a building should be paid for with anyone's privacy, including yours." "I know." "I will finish the ceiling. That is all I can do." "That is enough." It was not enough. They both knew it. They drank their coffee and went their separate ways within the same building. At noon, she found, on the lowest rung of her scaffold, a paper bag containing a slim, out-of-print volume on Edwardian gold-leaf technique that she had once mentioned, in passing, to a colleague at a conference in Boston 18 months ago. The book was inscribed only with her name and the date. She held it for a long time before she put it in her bag. She told herself, sternly, that a book was not a gift, and a gift was not an invitation, and an invitation was not a feeling. She made a list, that night at her kitchen table, of the kinds of gifts a man could give a woman who worked for him, without it being one or the other. The list was very short. It contained, in her careful handwriting, only 3 items: tools, books, and silence. The book was a book. The thermos he had not yet given her was a tool. She would, however, watch. She went on with her work, because the angel above her head had a key in her hand, and the key, on the back, had been signed in 1959 by a girl who had also been 27, and had also been told that the building was not for her. On Thursday afternoon, Maren rode the elevator to the 18th floor of the Whitlock building on Park Avenue, with a knot in her stomach that she had not had since the morning of her mother's funeral, which she had also attended in borrowed clothes. She was met at the doors of an enormous office by a woman in a bone-colored suit who introduced herself as Adrian's chief of staff, walked her through 3 high-ceilinged rooms, and turned her over to a tailor named Mr. Quinn. He measured her in respectful silence. He said only, when she protested the cost of the fabric, that the gown was being charged to the project and not to her. Maren accepted that, because the alternative was to keep arguing in a voice that was beginning to wobble. The fitting took an hour. She was beginning to think she might survive the afternoon, when the door opened and Cornelius Whitlock, 63 years old and silver-haired, and dressed in a charcoal three-piece suit that cost more than Maren's annual rent, walked in unannounced. "You are the painter." "I am the lead artisan, sir." "They tell me you are very good." "That is generous." "It is accurate. I have seen the photographs." He took a slow circuit of the fitting room and looked at her in the mirror rather than at her face. "I am told my son visits the lobby every morning. He has come twice this week. And brings coffee." "He brings coffee for the entire crew." "Does he?" "Mr. Quinn, the green is wrong. Try the wine." The tailor murmured something polite. Cornelius Whitlock continued, in the same level conversational tone, as if he had not just chosen the colour of a stranger's gown over her objection. "Miss Cole, you do excellent work. I am sure you have worked very hard for it. My son is a good boy, with poor instincts. He is fond of charity cases. The trust expects him, by his 30th birthday, to make a public commitment to a young woman of suitable family. We have been quite indulgent of his enthusiasms. I would not wish, at the Garner, for any confusion to arise. Do we understand each other?" She kept her hands very still. "I understand you, sir." "Good. The wine is more flattering. I will send the bill to the project. Enjoy the evening." He left. Maren did not move for some time. The chief of staff returned with a glass of water and a face arranged into apology. Maren shook her head. She did not need water. She needed, she thought, very precisely, never to come back to this building again. She also needed to finish the cherub above the column and to give it the dignity it had been denied for 65 years. She could not do both at the same time, and she would have to. She thanked Mr. Quinn. She thanked the chief of staff. She rode the elevator down alone, with her hand pressed flat against the brass rail. She walked from Park Avenue to Madison without remembering she had a coat. The November air had a clean edge. She did not call her sister. She did not call anyone. She arrived at her own front door at 6 in the evening, and she sat on the small bench in the entry of the building for 10 minutes before she went up, because she did not yet know what kind of face to put on for Delia. And Delia had not yet learned, at 6, to believe an aunt's tired face when the aunt said it had been a long day. At the curb, she did something she did not do, ever. She opened her phone and texted Adrian Whitlock the words, "I met your father," and she put the phone away before she could read his answer, because she did not want to know what kind of man was on the other end of an answer to that text. In the days that followed, the Halberstam became a place where two people learned each other in small, careful pieces, because they had been warned, in different ways, that they should not. Adrian arrived at 6:40. Maren had her brushes laid out by then. He brought coffee. He took it now without saying it was for the crew. He sat on a folding chair at the foot of the scaffold and read, sometimes, from a stack of old archival ledgers his grandmother had kept. Sometimes he watched her work. Sometimes he asked questions about color theory that she suspected he had researched the previous night, because the questions were too precise to be casual. She found, on a Wednesday, that her thermos had come unscrewed in her bag, and her gilding solution had soaked through the lining. The next morning, a new thermos, in dark green steel, was waiting on her toolbox with a paper note that read, "I should have checked the seal on the old one." He had also fixed, without telling her, the loose handle on the freight elevator she used, and replaced the burnt-out bulb at the top of her scaffold. He had, on the third Wednesday, replaced the broken latch on the door of the scaffold storage cupboard, where Maren kept her gilding solution and her best brushes. He had done it before the crew arrived. The note that morning had read, in his thin, steady hand, "I noticed the new boy could not get to the brushes." None of these were extravagant. All of them were noticed. At night, she sat with Ruth on the small couch and pretended to watch television. Delia slept in the next room. Ruth, who had not spoken to a man kindly in 4 years, watched her sister's face and asked, on a Sunday, "Who is he? Who is who?" "The one who fixed your thermos." "My boss." "Your boss does not fix thermoses. This one does." "Oh, Ma." "Don't. I'm not saying anything. You are saying everything." Ruth pulled her sister against her shoulder and did not say anything more. Maren let her head rest there because her own shoulder was tired. She thought, lying there, that she had spent her 20s being afraid of two things. The first was of becoming her mother, who had loved a man into ruin. The second was of being saved by a man she did not need. The man who fixed the thermos was, she had to admit, a man who had not asked her to need him. He had also not asked her to love him. He had asked her, every morning, only whether the cherubs were warm enough. She had told him, every morning, that they were. On a Tuesday in the third week, he asked her, quietly, why a painter in 1959 would have used Naples yellow rather than chrome yellow for the cherub's hair. She told him that Naples yellow was steadier under varnish, and steadier still under 60 years, and that Halberstam Rose had been, at 16, already the kind of artisan who painted for the future. Adrian was quiet for a long time. He said, eventually, that he had not realized his grandmother, at 16, had thought about what came after her. Maren said that all artisans did. Adrian said he did not, and she could see, from the scaffold, that the admission cost him something he did not yet know how to spend. On the Friday before the gala, 2.5 weeks since the morning he had first stood beneath the scaffold, Adrian climbed it. He climbed it because Maren had asked him to. The reason she had asked him was that she had finished The Angel with the Key, and the key was inscribed on its back with 2 letters and a date that she had not been able to read until that afternoon, and she wanted him to be the first person other than her to read them. He came up rung by rung in his coat. He was not afraid of heights, but he was afraid of the small distance between his face and hers, which the scaffold reduced to almost nothing once he was at the top. Maren held a hand mirror up to the angel's hand. He bent his head close to read. R.W., it said. May 12th, 1959. And under that, in a tinier hand, Beloved. He did not move for several seconds, and Maren did not move either, and the only sound in the lobby was the low hum of the freight elevator 3 floors below them. The cherubs, all of them, were quiet around them. The mirror caught the gold leaf. The gold leaf caught the light from the arched window. The light caught on his face an expression she had not seen on it before. That was the date she met your grandfather, Maren said. Yet, she painted his initials in before she met him. She wrote his initials in after. She came back a year later and added it. The book at the foot of my bed is her diary. The May 12th entry says, I painted him in. Mr. Whitlock. Adrian. Adrian. He did not move. She did not move. The mirror trembled in her hand. He took it gently from her, and he set it on a crossbar. He did not kiss her. They were standing on a scaffold under his grandmother's first commission, a week before his father intended to do something to him in front of 300 witnesses, and he understood, by that point, that to kiss her on a scaffold in private, before the gala, would be to give his father the photograph he wanted. He had decided, somewhere in the last fortnight, that the only thing he would not do was let his father turn this woman into a photograph. He took her hand instead. He held it for one long, deliberate breath, and he climbed back down. After the gala, he said from the floor. After the gala, she agreed. The night of the gala was unseasonably warm for late November. The lobby of the Halberstam, which had not seen its full ceiling in 6 decades, glowed under 120,000 watts of carefully placed light, as 300 guests filed in beneath a canopy of cherubs and angels, and one small angel with a key. Maren wore the gown her sister had altered overnight, deep emerald green silk with a high neckline and a bias-cut skirt that moved around her ankles like water. Ruth had spent 2 evenings unpicking the wine-coloured fabric Mr. Quinn had delivered and replacing it, against the tailor's polite protest, with a bolt of green Maren had been saving for a wedding she had not attended. Ruth had refused payment, Ruth had said, when Maren had tried to argue. He chose your colour for you. Your sister chose it back. Maren had not slept. She had pinned her hair high. She had put on the small gold earrings that had been her grandmother's. She had walked into the Halberstam lobby on her own legs at exactly 6 o'clock and had taken her place near the column with the angel above her head. And she had braced. The press was there. The investors were there. The Whitlock cousins were there in their measured rows. Cornelius Whitlock arrived at 6:20 and worked the room with the precision of a surgeon. Adrian arrived at 6:30 in a black tuxedo and crossed the room and found her by the column, and did not touch her. He nodded. He smiled, briefly. He took up his position beside his father at the dais. At 7 o'clock, Cornelius Whitlock raised a glass. "My friends," he began, in the warm tone of a man who has practiced warmth in mirrors. "Tonight we celebrate 65 years of the Halberstam Tower. 65 years of the most beautiful lobby in this city. And we celebrate also the extraordinary craftsmanship of the lead artisan who has restored our cherubs to their original glory. Miss Maren Cole." The applause was generous. Maren inclined her head. She did not curtsy. She did not smile. "I have one further announcement," Cornelius said. "The trust meets at midnight. There has been some confusion in recent weeks about my son's commitments. I should like to clear that confusion tonight, in front of all of you, while we are gathered in this beautiful place that he claims to love." He turned to Adrian. The room went quiet. "Adrian, the trust will vote at midnight on the future of this building. Either you will, before us, this evening, before these witnesses, kiss this young woman whose work has so moved you, and demonstrate that what we are watching is something other than a charity. Or I will sell the Halberstam by morning." The room did not breathe. Cameras lifted. A woman near the back put a hand to her mouth. Maren's face, in the brilliant light, drained until the freckles across her nose stood out like pinpricks. Her hands, which had been hanging at her sides, disappeared into the green silk of her dress. She did not look at Adrian. She looked at the angel above the column. The angel held her key. The key had been signed in 1959 by a girl who had been told that the building was not for her. Adrian stepped down off the dais. He crossed the room very slowly. The crowd parted for him because they did not know what else to do. He arrived at the spot where Maren stood. He stopped. He looked, for a long second, into her face. What he saw there was a woman who was preparing to be brave for a stranger, and who had paid for that bravery 100 times already in her life, and who should not be asked to pay for it once more in front of a room full of strangers because of the ego of his father. He did not touch her. He turned. He took 2 slow steps back, and then, in the center of the lobby of his grandmother's building, in front of 300 witnesses, he sank to one knee. There was a small, audible sound from the room, like a single dropped glass. He did not look at his father. He looked at Maren. He spoke loudly enough to be heard, and steadily, because he had been raised, despite everything, to steady his voice in public. "Miss Cole," he said, "I am sorry. I have been a quiet man in your life because I wanted to be careful with it. I came to the Halberstam every morning for 11 weeks before I spoke to you, because I did not trust myself to be near you for a reason that would not embarrass either of us. I have not earned your privacy, and I have not earned your face, and I have not earned the green of that dress, which I understand was not what was sent to you, and is therefore, I take it, your sister's. There is no scenario in this lifetime in which I trade your dignity for stone and plaster, no matter how much that stone has meant to me, no matter how much my grandmother left in this lobby. The building is my father's. You are not. I will not kiss you here. I will not let him buy your face for the room." He turned his head, finally, and looked across the lobby at Cornelius Whitlock, who had gone the color of old paper.
"Father, sell the building. I resign my seat on the trust. I will be out of the office on Park Avenue by Monday. Good night, all of you." He stood up. He bowed once to Maren. He walked, alone, the length of the marble floor he had been crossing every morning for 11 weeks, and he went out through the brass doors into the street. He did not look back. Maren did not move for a long time. The first person to move toward her was a young woman with a press credential. Ruth, who had been standing inside the door in a coat she had borrowed from the neighbor, intercepted her with an iron arm and a quiet sentence and removed her without further conversation. The second person to move toward her was Cornelius Whitlock, who had to be physically prevented from approaching by his own attorney.
The third person to move toward her was the angel above the column, who did not move at all, who was a painted cherub on a ceiling holding a small key, and who had been waiting 65 years to hear something like that said in this lobby. Marin left the gala alone. She did not take a coat. She walked 4 blocks before she let her sister catch up to her. She did not cry. She was too angry to cry. She was angry at Cornelius for staging it. She was angry at herself for being there. And she was angry, fiercely and not fairly, at Adrian Whitlock for thinking that kneeling in front of a woman in a public lobby was a smaller spectacle than kissing her, when both of them had been, in the end, a thing that had been done about her instead of with her. Ruth, who understood her sister, put her own coat around Marin's shoulders and walked her home in silence. Marin did not answer her phone for 4 days. Adrian called twice. He did not call a third time. He sent no flowers. He sent no apology that could be photographed. She did not work for those 4 days. She told the foreman she was sick, and the foreman, who had also been at the gala, told her she was not sick, and she should take as long as she needed. She slept through breakfast on the first day. She slept through lunch on the second. Ruth, on the third evening, sat on the edge of the small bed without speaking, and put her hand on her sister's back, and waited until Marin herself decided to roll over. "I know," Ruth said when Marin did. "I know you know. You can be angry. I am being angry. Be angry properly. Eat something." Marin ate, on the third evening, a small bowl of soup Delia had been allowed to stir. She walked, on the fourth afternoon, alone along the river, and she watched the water do the only thing the water knew how to do, and she thought about the difference between a man who chose your size of embarrassment for you and a man who forgot to choose anything for you at all. The first was, she understood at last, kinder. The second was unkindness wearing manners. That distinction took her, by the time she had walked back uptown, almost as long to forgive as the kneeling itself. He sent, on the second day, a single short email. It read, "I understand. Take the time you need. The Halberstam lobby is yours to finish in your own hours. The crew has been instructed to leave you alone. There is no longer a deadline. Do as you wish." He signed it Adrian, not Whitlock. Marin read it once, and closed her laptop, and did not open it again that evening. She went back to the lobby on the 5th day, alone, at 6:40 in the morning. The angel with the key still had a half-inch of varnish on her wrist that needed to come off, and the small commission the angel held in her hand had not been signed by Marin herself. Marin had decided, on the long walk home from the gala, that if the building was going to be wrecked in the morning, the cherubs at least deserved to go to their final rest finished. She climbed her scaffold. She set out her brushes. She worked. She did not hear him come in. The Halberstam had a heavy front door and good acoustics, and she had heard everyone for 3 months, and she had not heard him. He must have come in through the service entrance. She knew he was there only when she smelled the coffee. She did not look down. She kept working. He set the cup, very quietly, on the lowest rung. He did not say anything. After half an hour, she said, "Mr. Whitlock." "Adrian." "Adrian." "Yes." "Why are you here?" "I am here," he said carefully, "because I came to say goodbye to the lobby. The trust did not vote in the end. My father postponed it." "Why?" The press the next morning was not what he had expected. I'm told the phrase used at his Tuesday breakfast by his own attorney was unforced error. He has agreed, with some bitterness, to sell the building for $1 to me personally, to keep the family name out of further headlines. I came here this morning to walk the lobby alone. I did not know you would be here. She said nothing. She kept working. After a while, she said, "You bought the building?" "I bought the building." "For me?" "No." His voice was steady. I bought it because Halberstam Rose painted those cherubs, and because the building was always hers, and because my father was wrong, 65 years ago and last Saturday and tonight, to think it was his. I am keeping it. I am opening the lobby to a non-profit named for her. I have been on the phone with 3 foundations for 48 hours. The work, Marin, will continue. The cherubs will be safe. Don't give it to me as a ring. I am not. Good. I am not asking you anything tonight. Good. She climbed down the scaffold 10 minutes later, slowly because her ankles were tired, and she stood on the marble in front of him without touching him. And she said, Adrian, I was angry at you for kneeling in front of me. I was angry at you for choosing the size of my embarrassment for me. I was not angry at you for refusing to kiss me. I want that to be clear. It is clear. I did not want to be kissed in front of 300 people any more than I wanted to be the photograph. I wanted to be left alone. You did one of those things. You did not do the other. I am sorry. I know. Tell me what you would have wanted. She thought about it. I would have wanted you to take my hand and walk me out of the lobby through the front door, with my chin up, and to never go back. I would do that now. I know. May I? Not tonight. Tonight I am going home to my sister. I have not finished the cherub. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow. He nodded. He picked up the empty coffee cup he had brought her, because he was the kind of man who did not leave his trash in a lobby he had just bought, and he walked across the marble, and did not look back. She watched him go. She climbed back up the scaffold. She finished the angel with the key by lunchtime. She signed the back of the cherub's hand in a small, steady letter with her own initial and the date. The Halberstam Rose Foundation was incorporated 4 weeks later in a small room on the 18th floor of the Whitlock building on Park Avenue that Adrian no longer used, because Adrian had moved his desk into a converted office on the 4th floor of the Halberstam itself, 2 flights below where Marin now worked. The lawyers worked through Christmas. The press release, when it went out, was 3 sentences long, and it did not mention Cornelius Whitlock by name. The first apprentice, a young woman from Detroit named Inez, arrived in February with a portfolio of frescoes she had restored in a Catholic church in her hometown. The second, a man named Benyat from outside Bilbao, arrived in March. The third, a woman from Queens named Devora, arrived a week later. Marin interviewed each of them on the marble floor of the Halberstam lobby, and she did not, in any of those interviews, sit down. She had decided, on the long walk home from the gala, that the Halberstam interviews would be conducted in the lobby itself, because the lobby would tell her, more honestly than any portfolio could, who was there to be near the cherubs, and who was there to be near the Whitlock name. Hector, who in 1981 had been hired as a night janitor, and who had been the first man in the building to call Marin by her first name, came up to her on a Thursday in February and said, "Miss Cole, I owe you an apology." She told him no, he did not. "I did. I was wrong about him." Marin took the apology because he had needed to give it. She did not pass it on to Adrian. She told Hector, instead, that she would like him to attend any future foundation event in a suit, and that the foundation would buy him the suit, and that she would not accept his refusal of the suit, because the cherubs deserved a Hector who looked like he knew what he had built. Mr. Quinn, the tailor, called Marin 3 times in those months. The first call was in late November, and was a short apology in which he offered to remake the gown at his own cost. The second was in January, and was the explanation that he had, after the gala, stopped accepting commissions from Cornelius Whitlock. The third was in March, and was an inquiry about whether the foundation might consider commissioning 2 work coats in dark green steel canvas for the apprentices, at his shop's expense. Marin said yes to the third call, and politely no to the first. Adrian, in those months, did not ask her any question whose answer was supposed to be the rest of her life. He asked her instead what color paint she wanted on the foundation's office wall. He asked her whether the 3rd floor needed a kettle. He asked her whether Delia had outgrown her boots. He asked her whether Ruth would consider taking the foundation's communications role, because Ruth,
despite the 4 part-time jobs she had been hired and unhired from, knew every reporter in the city by their byline and could tell from a single press call which of them had read the project brief and which had not. Ruth said yes. Cornelius did not appear in any of this. The trust, after the postponement, met in March and confirmed that the Halberstam was Adrian's personal property and that the trust had no further interest in it. Adrian sent his father a note that read only, "Thank you." Cornelius did not reply. By the time the marble floor of the Halberstam Tower had been quiet for 5 months, Adrian and Maren had walked across it together at 6:40 in the morning, more than 100 times. They had also, by then, walked across it, without coffee, in old clothes, on the kind of Saturday morning when they were the only 2 people in the building. In the small hours of a Saturday 5 months later, on the day after Maren had moved her brushes into a workshop the Halberstam Rose Foundation had built her on the 3rd floor of the building she now ran the restoration program for, Adrian asked her a question he had not asked anyone before. He asked her on the marble floor of the Halberstam lobby, in clothes neither of them had been photographed in, with no audience but a sleepy 6-year-old in a flannel nightgown, who was Ruth's daughter Delia, and Ruth herself, who was now the foundation's communications director, and the 3 apprentices Maren had hired the month before. There was also a janitor named Hector, who had worked in the Halberstam since 1981, and who had been at the gala and had not approved of Adrian then, and had since changed his mind. The lobby was quiet, in the way that lobbies are quiet at 4 in the morning, when the first light has not yet come up over the avenue. Adrian was in a navy sweater. Maren was in jeans and a paint-flecked shirt, because she had been working until 2 on the column above them. He took her hand. He did not kneel this time. He stayed standing, because she had once told him, on a long walk through the park in February, that she would prefer it if he stayed standing. "Maren Cole," he said, "will you marry me?" She looked up at the cherubs, all of them now visible, all of them now signed. The small angel with the key looking down at the 2 of them, with an expression that had been patient for 65 years. She looked back at him. "Yes," she said, "on one condition." "Which is?" "That we get married in this lobby, with the doors closed, with Hector, and Ruth, and Delia, and Mr. Quinn, who has called me 3 times to apologize for the wine fabric, and the crew, and no press. Done. And one more thing." "Yes." "That you remember, every time you cross this floor for the rest of our lives, what you said to me the night of the gala, about not buying my face for the room." "I will not forget." "Good." He kissed her, very gently, because there was no one in the lobby to see it, except the people who loved them, and because he had told her, on a scaffold one rainy Friday 11 months ago, that they would have an after the gala, and the gala was now a long time finished. Delia, who was 6½ and watching, said into the marble silence, "Aunt Mar, are we done?" Maren laughed. Ruth laughed. Hector wiped his face with the back of his hand and pretended he was not. Adrian put his forehead against Maren's forehead for one more breath, and looked up, only briefly, at the angel above the column. The angel held her key. The key, 65 years and 1 season later, had finally let someone in. Outside on the avenue, the first light was coming. Inside, the lobby of the Halberstam Tower glowed under the cherubs. Halberstam Rose, who had once been told that maids did not eat dinners, had a granddaughter-in-law now who was not a maid, and was not a Whitlock, and was, in every way that mattered to the building, her heir. The wedding, 3 months after the proposal, was small. There were 42 chairs set out under the cherubs, because Maren had counted, the night before, the people who had stayed. Hector wore the suit. Mr. Quinn wept twice, quietly, into a handkerchief Ruth had given him. Delia carried a small bouquet of cream roses, tied with a length of dark green ribbon she had chosen herself. Adrian did not give a speech. Maren did not give one either. The judge who married them was a woman in her 60s who had been, in the 1980s, one of the first women to clerk in this circuit, and who had met Halberstam Rose once at a charity reception, and had never forgotten her.
She kept her remarks to 4 minutes. She said, at the end, that the lobby was a beautiful witness, and the Halberstam Rose Foundation was a good name, and she pronounced them married, and the cherubs above the column did exactly what cherubs always do, which was watch in painted silence. Cornelius Whitlock did not attend the wedding 3 months later, but he sent a short note, which Marin read once and put away. The note said only, "You were right. I am sorry." He never sent another. He did not need to. The lobby remained. The cherubs remained. The small angel with the key kept her place above the column. Every morning, for the rest of his life, Adrian Whitlock crossed the marble at 6:40 with 2 coffees in his hands. He did not slip on the floor, his grandmother had once called the beautiful enemy. The woman waiting for him at the foot of the scaffold had told him, on their first morning together, that she knew everyone's footstep in this building by week 3. She had known his by week 1. She had simply been waiting to learn, from his own mouth, why he had been coming. Now she knew. Now they all knew. And the building, in the only sense that mattered, had at last come home.